Hey everyone, what we're going to do today is going to take you through how to convert a flat text file into an XLS or an Excel file using MuleSoft. Now for this task you'll need to have the MuleSoft Enterprise version. The reason for that is that we'll be using the Mule transformation task, which is not available through the Community Edition. At a later date we will go through how to do that via the Community Edition, but for today we'll be using the Enterprise version. Okay, so to start off with, what we need to do is create a new project. So we'll just create a new Mule project. And make sure that your runtime is on EE, so Enterprise Edition. So for this, we'll just call it Text to Excel. And click Finish. Now once it's finished, we'll be taken straight away into our Mule design flow. So for symbolization purposes, what we'll be doing is just picking up a file, the text file, and then deliver it to a local file as well, but obviously converting that to Excel. So first off, we're just going to search for the file adapter and drag that into our flow, and we'll pick the path. I'll set the archive directory. Now, just in case it's unknown, if you don't actually provide a pattern, it'll just use the default file name. So that's something that a lot of people think they need to then do the inbound properties. If you leave the pattern blank, it will use the original file name. So once we've selected that, and I'm not going to worry about my name regex, we're now going to put in the transformer. So this is the transform message task, and it's a weird transform component, so that's why it's part of the Enterprise Edition only. So if we drag and drop that across, it'll open up in our Mule properties the defined payload for the input and the output. So because MuleSoft doesn't actually know anything about that file yet, what we can actually do is we can define the metadata manually. So if I click on define metadata, and if I click add, and we'll just call it text file, and go create type. Now when you create this, you'll have a type syntax should be defaulted to simple. What we do is we change it to CSV. So even though it's going to be a text file, CSV allows us to read in a text file and adjust it accordingly. Now the good feature about this is that you can actually load in a sample file to create a reference. So if we click open, and we'll go and choose our example file. And what you'll find is that the task is actually quite smart to know that the actual delimiter is not a comma, it is a tab delimited. And you can see straight away that it's brought in an example of what that file looks like. So I've just made up a text file with basic information. So if we click OK, what you'll find is it shows the item header, comments, information. So these are all the headers that are in the text file. Now, if we click select, we've now loaded that, and you can see that that information in here has been loaded in. So that's great, but how do we then convert that over to an Excel? So again, we go to the output and we click define metadata. Now we need to go and add a new output. So click on add, and ID, we'll just call it Excel, and click create type. Now again, back into type, we hit the drop down, and here we can select Excel. It is in beta mode, but I haven't come across any issues yet, so I'm pretty confident that even though it's in beta, it will suit everyone's purposes. So click on beta, and then what you'll see straight up is that it doesn't actually have an import sample file. So this is something I actually need to manually create. But what you can see down the bottom is that it actually has sheet 1. So if you need to create multiple sheets or rename a sheet, you can do that by hitting the plus and rename. Now for our purposes, we want to only have a single XLS file. So I'm going to go and create the first header. So column 1, and we'll call it XL header 1. Now, of course, this is the name of the top row of your column, so it's whatever you want to call it. Just for training purposes, I'm just using standard information. So I'll create another one and just call it Excel header 2. And another. Now I'm sure that from that you've gauged of exactly what we're doing. You can just add more. You can adjust if you require, so you can move them up or down. Once you're happy with what you want the Excel file to look like, press the select button. And that'll load that output for the metadata into the output file under Excel sheet 1. And as you can see, Excel header 1, 2, and 3. Now for this, it's simple as drag and drop to create a connection. Now this will automatically load the payload from the CSV to the Excel. Now as you can see here with DataWeave, it's automatically generating. So since we're not going to do anything fancy, we're just going to convert from text to Excel. We don't need to do any enhancements. It's pretty much just drag and drop to where we want to go. So I'm going to just drag, and I'm going to drag the information across. And as you can see, all I want in my converted Excel file is item header, comments, and item number. Now, there is one thing that you need to be very mindful of. Even though we imported the sample file and it defined it as tab, in the actual payload transformation, it still will define it as a CSV. So what we need to do is right click on the payload list and go down to reader configuration. Now when you go into reader configuration, you'll actually notice that the separator is still comma. So this is where we need to change this to tab, which for Mule is \T. So this will then make sure that when it reads the file, being a text file, that it will use the separator as a tab delimited and not a comma. So click OK. Now I'm going to deliver that file as an XLS. So file, drag in, and I'm just going to deliver it to a drop-off location. Now, because this is an XLS, I obviously do want a file name pattern. Now, if you want to use the original file and adjust it through, you can do that. But for today, we're just going to call it converted Excel file .xlsx. Okay. So it is in the 2007 version. So if you did make it as an XLS, it will still open and it will still work. However, it will give you the warning that it believes it to be corrupt. So just make sure that you do change your extension to xlsx and not xls. And if we just save this project, now I'm going to run it, and what we'll then put the file in and see it being taken and then converted. So I'm going to run it as a Mule application, and it's going to take me through the console, and fingers crossed everything will load up and it will say it's deployed. So status is deployed, so the application is successful. So if I go to grab my sample text file and place that in pickup, that file should be taken, which it has been, and I should see it in the archive. And as you can see, it is still kept the same name, and I can see down in the console that it found, did the connection, and then delivered. So if I go and check the drop-off, you'll then see that it's now a converted Excel file, which is what we called it. So if we double click and open, it is now translated and converted that into an Excel file with the only information I wanted, which was item header 1, comments value, and item number. And then these were the headers that we created. So as you can see, they're up in number 1. Now, if you might be wondering, oh, this is just converting the tab delimited and just calling it XLS. No. If we right click and just go to edit a notepad, you will see that it is in computer jargon. So it is a true xlsx file. So you don't have to worry about people going, I actually need this. You've actually converted the file properly. You've given it to them an xlsx file, and it's a true Excel file for anybody to read, open, view, etc. So I hope that helps out. As I said, I just want to re-emphasize that when you go and use your transformer, just to make sure that you right click on the payload and go into reader configuration and you ensure that your separator is set correctly.